Ravenna. Spring 540 AD, fog on the marshes. A single rider comes out of the Roman camp and walks his horse along the base of the walls. He rides slowly. He looks up at the towers one by one. The gate, the Gothic banners wet, hanging still in the cold air. A sentry on the wall watches him pass and does not raise a bow. Everyone on that wall knows who he is. He looks for a while, then he turns the horse and rides back. No signal, no assault. Just a man counting towers in the fog, the way he has counted them every morning of this siege. He is in his mid-30s. His name is already enough to make men on a wall lower their voices. Behind those walls, in a room the general cannot see, the Gothic nobles are arguing. Every road out of this room is closed. Their king has failed them. Their city is starving. To surrender to the emperor in Constantinople, 1,200 miles east behind marble, would mean the end of their kingdom and, most likely, of themselves. No terms they trust, no mercy they can count on, just the machinery of the empire grinding their people into subjects. And the man camped outside the walls will wait, they know by now, for as long as it takes. 3 ways to die. So one of them says the unthinkable thing out loud. Not surrender. An offer. They will open the gates to him. They will make the general their emperor, emperor of the West, a Roman ruler, yes, but their own, chosen here, not the distant one who frightens them. Around that table, not every man means the same thing by it. Some are desperate. Some want a shield against Justinian. Some are already thinking past the ceremony to what a foreign general might be worth once the gates are open and the crown is on his head. Different men, different knives, one plan. They send a messenger out to the Roman camp. The messenger delivers the offer. The crown, the city, the kingdom of the West, handed over at the opening of a gate. Belisarius listens, and he says yes, yes to all of it. He lets them believe he accepts it. The messenger rides back through the gates with the answer the nobles wanted to hear. The gates of Ravenna swing open. The Roman army comes in, not through a breach, not over the dead, but up the main street in order, while the Gothic nobles wait to receive the man who has agreed to be their emperor. The garrison stands down. The treasury sits unlocked. There is something close to celebration in the streets. After all the winter's dying, the city thinks it has bought itself a future. Belisarius rides in through the open gate. Before we go further, if this is your first time here, subscribe. We make long-form history like this every month. And leave a comment. If you were standing at that gate, with a crown in your hands and no one to stop you, what would you have done? Hold on to your answer. It will change by the end. He dismounts inside the walls in one of the great houses, with the Gothic lords gathered to honor him, and he begins to give orders. Arrest the king. Guards move. Witiges is taken. Seal the treasury. Not one coin leaves. Hold the gates with our own men. The Roman soldiers step into the doorways. It takes only a few minutes. The smiles die around the room. The nobles look at the guards in their doorways and understand too late what has just ridden into their city. There was never going to be an emperor of the West. The nobles thought they had offered him a crown. What they had given him was a way through the gate. He used it. Now the gate is open, and he sets the offer down and forgets it. He calls for a scribe. Belisarius stands near the window while the man prepares the wax. The window faces east, toward the sea, toward Constantinople, 1,200 miles away. He dictates the report. Ravenna has fallen. The treasury is intact. Witiges is in custody. He will be sent to Constantinople. No request for a reward, no explanation of the offer, no mention of the crown, just the result. Now stand where he stood. The city is behind him. The gates are open, the treasury is sealed, the Gothic king is under guard, the soldiers in the streets will do what he tells them. One word, and the West is his. Not a claimant, not a rebel with a case to argue. A crown offered freely, at the open gate of a conquered capital, by the very men who owned it. The garrison would swear to him by nightfall. The Gothic lords have already knelt once, they would kneel again. Italy, the old heartland of the Roman world, would answer to a man born with nothing, and there is no army between here and the Eastern Sea that could take it back from him. He has spent his whole life being handed other men's wars to win. This one time the prize is his own. All he has to do is keep his mouth shut and let the nobles crown him. He sends it east instead. Every coin, every wall, the king in chains, the crown itself, packed up and shipped to the one man alive already certain he would keep it for himself. The emperor will read the report and understand exactly what was on the table. He will know Belisarius had a choice. He will know he gave it back. That should have meant something. It did not. A city, a king, a kingdom. All of it handed to the man in Constantinople who was already afraid of him. Why? Not the military question, that one is easy. He had the army. He had the city. Justinian could not have touched him here. The other question, the one that takes the rest of his life to answer. Why hand it back to the man who feared him? To reach it, you have to go back. Before this gate, before the campaigns, before the name that traveled ahead of him. Back to a border province where a boy with no name learned what men like him were allowed to want. Go back 30 years. A boy in Thrace, the border country that runs across what is now Bulgaria and northern Greece. No estate, no Senate seat, no inherited office. His family name appears nowhere in the records of Roman nobility. A nobody from the edge of the empire. For a boy like him, there is one road that leads up, and only one. Not the Senate, you are born into that. Not the church, not the law, not the great families whose sons are handed commands before they have ever seen a spear thrown in anger. Just the army. You walk in with nothing but your body, and the army does not care whose son you are. It cares whether the men next to you come home. So he walks in. A recruit from the border, one of thousands, the kind of face that fills out a muster roll and is forgotten. He is not forgotten for long. Picture the officers who outrank him in those first years, men with estates behind them, family names that open doors, the ones who expected to command because commanding is what men like them do. They watch this Thracian with no lineage get handed responsibility, then more of it. Some of them resent it, a few say so. And then they watch him work. He does not shout. He does not throw men at a wall to prove something. He rides out and looks, the way he will one day look at the walls of Ravenna, and he sees the shape of a fight 3 moves before it arrives, and he moves his men so that when it comes, they are already standing where they need to stand. The soldiers notice this before the generals do. Soldiers always do. They learn that the ones who serve under this officer tend to survive him. In an army, that is a kind of fame that travels faster than any dispatch. Men begin asking to be posted under him. He rises, not because of a name he was born with, he had none, because of what happened to the men who followed him. When the old emperor dies in 527, his nephew takes the throne. The nephew is named Justinian. Justinian does not fight. He is a lawyer, a builder, a man who will leave behind law codes and churches instead of battlefields. But he wants something enormous, not just to hold the empire he has, to take back everything Rome has lost. North Africa, Italy, Spain, the whole Western world that broke off into barbarian kingdoms 50 years before. For that, he needs one thing he does not have: a sword he can trust completely. He looks down the ranks of his army, and he picks the man from the border with no name. The test comes fast. A Persian army pushes into Roman Mesopotamia. 25,000 men, cavalry, infantry, war elephants. They expect to find a frontier garrison and brush it aside. Belisarius meets them at a fort called Dara with 15,000, 10,000 short. Open ground, nothing to hide behind. He has 3 days before the Persians arrive to prepare. Watch what he does with those 3 days. He does not build walls, he does not dig in to wait. He digs trenches, long, shallow channels cut across the open ground in front of his position, not to hide his men in, to steer horses. A cavalry charge needs to flow forward. These trenches interrupt the flow, force the horses to angle left or right, channel them where he wants them to go. Then he thins his own center on purpose. Not by accident, not because he lacks men. He pulls men out of the center and puts them on the flanks. He makes the middle look like the weakest point on his line. The Persians arrive on the 2nd day. Their commander looks at the Roman formation and sees what Belisarius wants him to see: a thin center, waiting to be broken. The morning of the 3rd day, the Persian cavalry advances. The Roman center gives ground, bending, retreating, drawing the Persians forward into the space between the trenches. The Persian infantry presses behind them, confident, reading it as a rout beginning. Then the flanks close. The Roman cavalry that had been held back on both sides comes in from the left and the right simultaneously, hitting the Persian column from 2 directions at once, while the center stops retreating and pushes back. The Persians are caught between 3 forces in ground they cannot maneuver across, and the trench lines that looked like the Roman army's defensive fortifications have become walls around a trap. The larger army breaks. The Persians lose their formation and flee north. Belisarius does not pursue far, not his style, not worth the cost. He stops his army, counts his dead, and lets the Persians go. Dara, 530. His name reaches Constantinople for the first time. Then watch what he does with the victory. A tent after the battle, a scribe with wax. Belisarius dictates the report, the ground, the trenches, the moment the line held. He counts the dead on both sides, carefully, Roman and Persian. When it is finished, he takes his seal and presses it into the corner of the tablet. Not the top. The corner, where a clerk's mark goes, not a commander's. The victory goes to the emperor. The army is the emperor's army. He does not decide this. He does not argue it to himself. It is simply how the world is built as far as he can see. The credit runs up to the throne the way water runs downhill. And for a man who began with nothing, that shape is not a cage. It is the floor he stands on. The rank came from the throne. The army came from the throne. The right to stand on a field and move thousands of men, all of it came from the throne. He did not earn power first and then choose to be loyal. It went the other way. The loyalty came first. Everything he had grew out of it. In 530, standing over a broken Persian army, none of that looks like a problem. He is young, rising, trusted completely, and the 2 of them have an empire to rebuild. Then comes January 532, and everything he believes about trust is tested inside a single week. Constantinople, January 532. The Hippodrome. 100,000 people in the stands and two factions who hate each other, the blues and the greens, sitting on opposite sides the way they always do. But the city underneath them has been simmering for months. Justinian's tax collectors have been squeezing everyone with a coin to squeeze. His lawyers have been rewriting the rules in ways that always seem to end with more money flowing to the throne. Both factions have grievances, and for once they are the same grievances. Then, a few days before, it boils over. A handful of rioters from both sides are condemned to hang. On the scaffold, the rope breaks twice, and two of the condemned, one blue, one green, fall and live. The crowd reads it as a sign. They beg for mercy, for a pardon. The emperor gives them nothing. So now they are in the Hippodrome, blue and green together, staring up at the box where he sits. And on this day, they stop hating each other. They turn toward the imperial box and they chant one word, together. Nika. Victory, not their victory, the emperor's defeat. Within 2 days, the city is on fire. Guards go down in the streets. Hagia Sophia burns. The mob drags an old emperor's nephew out of a monastery and starts calling him the real ruler. Inside the palace, 5 days in, the fire close enough to see from the windows, the advisors give Justinian the answer. The city is lost. Get on a ship, take the gold, take the court, sail out while the harbor is open, win it back later from somewhere safe. And Justinian agrees. Down at the harbor, they begin loading the ships. The gold comes out in chests. The plan is moving. Then a door opens, and the Empress walks in. Theodora. Born to a bear trainer in the circus, the very bottom of a city obsessed with rank. She married an emperor who rewrote the law to make it legal because no one born where she was born had ever been allowed to wear the purple. She looks at the men. She looks at the chests of gold going out the door. She will not run. She would rather die wearing the purple than live having taken it off. Purple, she says, makes a fine shroud. Then she stops talking, and the room goes quiet, and everyone in it turns to the emperor. He does not answer at once. Look at him in that silence, the most powerful man in the world, and every instinct he has is telling him to run. The ships are ready, the gold is loaded, the harbor is still open, and outside the walls 100,000 people are chanting for his death. He could be at sea within the hour, alive, deposed, but alive. His wife has just told him she will die here rather than take off the purple. He looks at the open door, at the servants waiting on his word, at her, and he turns away from the door. The gold goes back into the vaults. The ships stay at the dock. The court, which was ready to sail, watches its emperor decide to stay and fight for a throne it had already written off. But a decision is not an army. Theodora can hold one man in place. She cannot disperse the tens of thousands burning the city down. That takes something else. That takes Belisarius. That takes the man from Dara. Belisarius stands outside the Hippodrome with the soldiers he could gather, not an army, a few hundred men who never left the palace. Beside him, another general, Mundus, come in from a different gate with his own men. Between them, the roar of 100,000 people packed into the stands, still chanting, sure they have already won. He reads it the way he reads a battlefield. The crowd is not an enemy line. It has no flanks, no reserve, no commander. It is a mass, jammed into a stone bowl with a handful of exits, and it does not know he is there. It is looking inward at the man it wants to crown. It has its back to him. He does not charge the doors. He splits the force, his men to one entrance, Mundus and his men to another, the far side, so the two of them come in from opposite ends of the same trap. Then he seals the exits, and gives the order. His soldiers move inward from both ends. The crowd has nowhere to go, the gates behind them are shut, the stone banks of the stadium funnel everything toward the center, and there is no fighting back because there is nothing to fight back with. What the crowd has is mass, and mass has no value once the exits are closed. It takes hours, not minutes, hours. The hippodrome is large, and there are 100,000 people inside it, and the work is methodical. At some point the chanting stops, then the screaming, then the sound of the crowd itself, which has been constant since dawn, begins to thin. By the time the doors open again, roughly 30,000 people are dead on the sand where the chariots run. The rival is dragged out and taken. The fires, with no one left to feed them, go out on their own. The throne is safe. Justinian will hold it for another 33 years. The day after, in front of the whole court, Justinian comes down off the throne. He takes Belisarius by both shoulders. He calls him the man who saved the empire, the right arm of the state. He embraces him like a brother, in front of every senator and general who watched the city burn. His hands stay a moment longer than they need to. And over Belisarius's shoulder, just for a breath, his eyes move, scanning the faces of the generals standing in the room, reading which ones are watching this moment too carefully. Then he steps back, still smiling, still warm. Belisarius feels the embrace and believes it. Why would he not? It is real. He does not feel the other thing yet, the measuring, the part of the emperor that is already, even inside the embrace, working out how to keep this man close and useful, and never, ever still. He had saved the throne. He would spend the rest of his life being watched for, knowing how easily he could have taken it. 2 years later, Justinian wants North Africa back. The map on the palace wall tells the story. A whole coast in the wrong color. The old breadbasket of the Mediterranean, the grain that fed Rome for 5 centuries, gone to the Vandal kingdom since 429, over 100 years in other hands. His advisors stand in front of that map and tell him no. They remember the last time. 468, a Roman fleet burned in the water, supply lines cut, thousands of men left to die on a beach, 64,000 pounds of gold spent on nothing. They remember. They say it cannot be done. He sends Belisarius anyway. 15,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, 92 warships, 500 transports, against a kingdom that has held the coast for a century. It takes 11 months. The fleet lands on the Sicilian coast first, then crosses to Africa. The Vandal kingdom has held this coast for over 100 years and believes it will hold it longer. What they do not expect is a Roman force moving this fast, this far inland, before the king can assemble his full army. The first engagement is at a place called Ad Decimum, 10 miles from Carthage. Gelimer has split his forces to catch the Romans in a pincer. It is a reasonable plan. It requires coordination and timing. Belisarius does not let him have either. He reads the approach routes and hits the pincer before it closes, striking the Vandal flanks separately, destroying each piece before it can join the others. By the time Gelimer realizes his plan has come apart, the battle is already over. Carthage falls the same week. Gelimer retreats and rebuilds. The second engagement is at Tricamarum a few months later. The same method: thin the center, hold the flanks, wait for the enemy to commit, then close. Gelimer's army breaks. The king runs. He runs into the mountains of western North Africa with a handful of followers and holds there through the winter, in conditions that slowly reduce him from king to survivor. Belisarius does not storm the mountains. He waits, keeps supply lines to the king cut, and lets the winter do the work. In the spring of 534, Gelimer sends word that he will come down. He surrenders in person. The king of North Africa for 15 years, surrendering to a general from Thrace who arrived 11 months ago with a fleet his own advisors said was too small. Belisarius puts him in chains for the journey east. Belisarius brings him back to Constantinople in chains, and the city gives him something no private citizen has seen in living memory: a triumph. The old ceremony, the victorious general paraded through the capital. One of the last great triumphs ever granted to a man who was not the emperor. Picture the street. He rides through the heart of the city. Behind him walks Gelimer, king of North Africa a year ago, a prisoner now, in the city that erased his kingdom. Behind the king, the wagons, Vandal gold, silver, sacred objects looted from Jerusalem 4 centuries ago, rolling toward the emperor's treasury. The crowd fills every street, every window, every rooftop, and listen to what they shout. Not the emperor's name, his. 100,000 people, and the word in their mouths is his name. The son of nobody, from the edge of the empire, riding through the center of the Roman world while it chants for him. Up in the imperial box, above the track, the emperor is watching. Belisarius knows he can hear it too. Belisarius comes before him, and Justinian is smiling. He comes down to meet him, warm, warmer than anyone expected, in front of the whole city. He takes the general's hand. He calls him the sword of the empire. He speaks of North Africa like a man tasting it, this thing that was won for him, and for one moment they are not an emperor and a general. They are 2 men who wanted the same impossible thing and got it. Belisarius believes it. There is nothing in that face to disbelieve. So he gets down off the horse, and he kneels. No one makes him. He does it in front of all of them, at the loudest moment, where every person in the crowd can see the conquering general go down onto the stone before the throne. Let the emperor see this picture, not the name in the crowd, the man who owns that name, on his knees, handing all of it upward. What more could a man show? He kneels, and he waits. The crowd has not gone quiet. 100,000 people do not go quiet, but the chanting shifts for just a moment, the way a wave pauses before it breaks. Everyone in that street can see what is happening. The man they were calling for has put himself on the ground in front of the throne. The emperor watches him kneel, and he reads it the other way. There is supposed to be one name in these streets, one man whose victories are Rome's victories, whose face is on the coins, whose name is cut into the stone. That man is the emperor, and the crowd is chanting someone else. He had done everything right, taken the campaign no one believed in, won it in under a year, brought back a king and a treasury, knelt without being asked twice. Everything right. And that was the danger. Not that he might do something wrong, that he had become, just by winning, a question the man above him could not stop asking. Not will he betray me? Could he? The crowd is still chanting his name when the first order arrives. Come home. No crisis, no emergency. The campaign is over. Your work in the field is done. Come home. Belisarius comes home. He always comes home when he is told to. Nothing in North Africa required it. Everything in Constantinople did. A general the crowds chant for, with an army that would follow him anywhere. You keep that man close. Keep him moving. Keep him pointed at the next enemy. Never leave him standing still long enough for anyone to wonder what else he might do with 15,000 men. He has not yet found the name for what is happening to him. He will. That brings us back to Italy in 540 AD. The Italian campaign has been running for 5 years. 5 years. He lands in Sicily in 535 and moves north. The peninsula is 800 miles of mountains and fortified cities connected by roads that an advancing army can follow, only to find the next position equally well defended. There is no sweeping maneuver available, no single decisive battle that ends the war. It is siege after siege, negotiation after negotiation, attrition dressed up as strategy. The first test is Naples. The city has walls, a garrison, and no intention of surrendering. A standard siege could last months. Belisarius rides around the walls for several days, looking. He finds an old aqueduct, disused, dry, running underneath the walls into the city. One night, a small group of his soldiers goes into the aqueduct on their hands and knees and crawls through the dark until they come up inside. They open a gate. The army comes in. Naples falls. He moves north toward Rome. The Gothic king, Witigis, assembles an army. One source puts it at 150,000, which is almost certainly inflated. But the point stands. It is large, and marches south to retake what he has lost. In March of 537, Witigis surrounds Rome. What follows is a siege within a siege. Belisarius is inside the walls with perhaps 5,000 men, holding a city built for 1 million against an army that outnumbers him several times over. The Goths ring the city with 14 camps, cut the aqueducts, and wait. Conventional wisdom says Rome falls. The supply lines into the city are stretched to breaking. Disease spreads through both armies, and every week the Goths press a little harder. He does not wait inside. He sends sorties out through the gates, quick raids against the Gothic camps, designed not to win ground but to keep the enemy unsettled, to bleed them in small pieces, to prevent them from ever feeling that the siege is already over. He repairs walls that the Goths damage. He reroutes supply through routes they have not yet cut. He holds Rome for over a year. In March of 538, Witigis withdraws. Belisarius pushes north, city by city, Rimini, Milan, the Po Valley, the road toward Ravenna. 4 more years of the same. Arrive, assess, find the angle, take it. Each city costs something. By the time only Ravenna remains, 540 AD, his army is thinner than when he started. His supply lines are held together with judgment and improvisation, and the man who gave him the mission has been watching his victories from 1,200 miles away with increasingly complicated feelings. And then Ravenna fell, and the king came out in chains, and the war appeared to be over. The dispatch from Constantinople arrives 3 weeks later, a courier, an imperial seal. Belisarius breaks it in his tent, alone. 2 words, come home. He reads them. He reads them again. He sets the paper down on the table next to the maps. His hand stays on the map for a moment. His finger is resting near a city called Mediolanum. Milan, they call it now. which he took in the third year of the campaign and which has been held by a garrison of 300 men ever since. He looks at it, then at the road south from there, then at the road north from the Gothic territories. He knows exactly what will happen to that road the moment his army sails. He lifts his hand off the map. He folds the order once along the crease and calls for his officers. Break camp. Prepare the fleet. We sail within the week. No argument. No request for clarification. No letter back asking for a reason. The order came. The order is from the Emperor. That is the complete sentence. His officers look at each other briefly and then begin. From the deck of a ship heading east, the Italian coastline disappears into the haze. He does not watch it go for long. Below decks, in the hold, the Gothic king Witigis sits in chains on his way to Constantinople. A trophy, a proof of what was built here in 5 years. What was built here in 5 years is already coming undone. The Goths have a new king. His name is Totila, and he is young, and he is not Witigis. He has been watching the Roman garrisons stretch thin across 800 miles of Italy, and he has been waiting for the pressure to lift. The pressure lifts the weak Belisarius sails. City by city over the next 4 years, Totila takes it back. The roads, the garrisons, the cities. Milan falls first, then the others, one by one, the way stones fall when you pull the one at the bottom of the wall. Belisarius had left them stacked. He knew exactly how they were stacked. He knew which stone was at the bottom. He sailed anyway. In Constantinople, Justinian receives him, warm as ever. A hand on the shoulder, words about the Vandal king already installed in a comfortable estate, about the glory of the Italian campaign, about what the two of them have built together. He means it. He always means it. And 3 months later he sends Belisarius east. The Persian front needs attention. There is always another front that needs attention. Belisarius goes. Back in Constantinople, around 541 AD. Antonina is his wife. She has been his wife for years, through the Persian campaign, through North Africa, through Italy. She is also the closest friend of the Empress Theodora, which means she has a thread that runs from their household all the way into the palace, and has for as long as either of them can remember. What follows comes from a single source. Procopius, the historian who traveled with Belisarius on every campaign and wrote the official record of those wars with evident admiration, also wrote something else. He called it the Anecdota. We call it the secret history. He kept it hidden until after his death. It reads like a document written by a man who spent decades storing up grievances and finally found a way to empty them all at once. According to this account, and only this account, Antonina had been conducting a prolonged affair with a younger man named Theodosius, who had lived in their household. According to the same account, Belisarius knew, not merely suspected, according to Procopius, knew. The source describes specific moments, walked in on them, confronted with evidence that left no room for interpretation. He had the standing to act. In the world he lived in, a man of his rank, with this kind of evidence, would have had every legal and social sanction to destroy both of them. He did nothing. He absorbed it. He stayed. The marriage continued. Antonina remained his wife and kept her connection to Theodora, and through Theodora to the court. We cannot take the secret history at its word on the details. Procopius wrote that book to damage people, and it shows on every page. The specific mechanics of what happened, the scenes he describes, these should be held at a distance. But the shape of the response, a man who had grounds to act and chose not to, that detail is consistent with every other thing we know. Watch the scene the morning after. No accusation across the table, no cold silence that announces itself. He passes her the bread. He asks about a letter that came from the palace. They talk about it. He has decided something, and you can see it in the decision not to decide, in the ordinary gestures of a man who has looked at a thing, understood it, and chosen to keep living as though it stays on the other side of a line he will not cross. He cannot bring himself to destroy what he has committed himself to. He never could. Which brings us to the name of the thing. Every Roman soldier swore it. Not a contract, not a term of employment. A vow made before the gods, the sacramentum, the military oath that had been sworn in the legions of the Republic and carried forward through every century since, into this late Roman world that Belisarius inhabited. The words bound you to the Roman state, through the emperor who embodied it, until you were released or until you died. To break it was not merely treason under the law. In the world that produced this oath, a man who broke the sacramentum was no longer a Roman soldier. He was no longer, in any meaningful sense, a Roman. He was no longer himself. Now look back. Ravenna, the crown in his hands. He sent it east. Italy, the order to come home, the map with his hand on it, the knowing. He folded the paper and sailed. Antonina, the evidence, the standing to act, the breakfast table the next morning. He passed her the bread, not restraint, not obedience, not forgiveness. In each of them something had been sworn, and once sworn, it held. The lock had a name. He had been living inside it his entire life without needing to name it, the way a man does not name the floor he walks on. Now name it. The sacramentum ran one way. He had sworn to serve Rome through the emperor who embodied it. Rome had sworn nothing back. That asymmetry was not incidental, it was the structure. Justinian could recall him at the moment of victory, deny every request, decide that success had become more dangerous than failure, and none of it would break Belisarius. The oath had no clause that said, "I will serve until I am treated badly." There was no condition. There was no exit. There was only the oath. Justinian had known this since the Hippodrome, since the afternoon he stood in a room with a man who had 30,000 deaths on his hands and had spent none of them on the throne. Every recall was the sacramentum. Every campaign with insufficient resources was the sacramentum. Every letter that went east and came back as silence, the sacramentum. The lock that was supposed to protect his honor had become the instrument by which an emperor managed a man who would never, could never break his word. The oath protected the empire. It did not protect him. And there is one more time the oath is tested, the heaviest one. 4 years after the first Italian campaign, in 544 AD, Justinian calls him back to the same front. He calls Belisarius in before he goes, the same room, the same warmth. He speaks of Italy, the way a man speaks of something he has already imagined restored. The cities back in Roman hands, the map corrected. The work of his reign made permanent. He needs Belisarius there. There is no one else he would trust with this. He says it, and he means it. Belisarius sails 2 weeks later. What he has when he lands, perhaps 4,000 men, across a peninsula that requires 10 times that to hold. What Totila has built in the 4 years since Belisarius left: a functioning kingdom, an army that has been winning, cities that prefer Gothic governance to Roman taxation. Belisarius sits down and writes the first letter. He is specific. He names the cities at risk, in order. He describes the Gothic strength in each region. He counts what he needs and explains why. He sends it to Constantinople. Nothing comes back. He writes again, more specific. He has now watched 2 of the cities he named fall, and he names the ones that will fall next. He sends it. Nothing. A 3rd letter, a 4th. Between the letters, the cities fall. Not in a single collapse, one by one, over months. Totila besieges them, one at a time, with an army Belisarius cannot match in the field. Each garrison holds as long as it can. Then the gates open. Belisarius rides where he can, skirmishes where he cannot do more. He is not losing battles. He does not have enough men to fight battles. He is watching from a distance as the map changes around him. In 546 AD, Rome falls to Totila. Belisarius retakes it in 547. He loses it again. The letters go east. Nothing comes west. At some point he stops expecting a reply. He still writes. Each letter goes out with the same precision, the same accounting. But the waiting has changed. He is no longer waiting for an answer. He is doing what a general does when he has been given a mission and nothing else. He reports, he moves, he holds what can be held, and he keeps writing into the silence because the orders have not changed. There is a moment, somewhere in those 4 years, not recorded, not witnessed, only inferable, when he sits alone, the latest dispatches showing another city lost, the lamp burning low, and he picks up a fresh piece of wax. He begins the next letter. In 548 AD, the recall comes, not because Justinian has assessed the situation, not because the letters have been read. It comes because Antonina needs to return to Constantinople. The Empress Theodora is dying. Antonina wants to be there. Belisarius leaves Italy for the last time. He leaves behind a peninsula still largely under Gothic control. He leaves behind the letters, somewhere in the palace, on a table, in a stack. Every recall was the sacramentum. Every campaign with insufficient resources was the sacramentum. Every letter that went east and came back as silence, the sacramentum. During those same years back in Constantinople, the other side of the silence has its own room. Leave Italy. Go to the palace. The dispatches arrive every few weeks. A servant brings them in, sets them on the table. The emperor reads them. Another city taken back by Totila. Another Gothic force moving south on a road that Belisarius held 3 years ago. And on every dispatch, the same name. Always the same name. The general asking for more men, more gold, more of anything, and doing more with what he has than anyone in that palace could account for. Justinian sets the dispatch down. He walks to the map. He has a map of Italy on the wall of a room he uses in the evenings, when the court has gone. He stands in front of it and looks at the colors, the territory Belisarius won in 5 years, the territory Totila has been reclaiming since, the ragged line that represents 4 years of a campaign run on almost nothing. There are men in this palace who could not have held the line for 4 months. He is holding it for 4 years on the strength of household troops and stubbornness and letters that the emperor has not answered. Justinian picks up a pen. He is going to write the reply the resources, the reinforcements, the acknowledgement. He holds the pen for a moment. He sets it down. He stands at the map for a while longer. He needs those dispatches. Everything he has built, the dream of a restored empire, the law codes and the churches and the name he is building for himself across the centuries, rests on military victories he cannot produce himself. He is not a soldier. He cannot stand on a field and make the decisions that win wars. He needs a man who can do that for him. That man's name is on every dispatch, and every dispatch proves it again, that the victories belong to the general, not the emperor. That the empire's greatest military success in a century was done by one man, in the field, making decisions the emperor could not make from 1,200 miles away. He needs those victories, and he cannot stop noticing who is winning them. So he watches. He reads the dispatches. He does not send the reply. He keeps Belisarius pointed at an enemy, always moving, never still, and never quite resourced enough to be comfortable, never given enough to stop needing to ask. Because a general who asks is a general who is still dependent. A general who has everything he needs might start thinking about what else he might want. Late one evening, the servants gone, the candles burned low, Justinian is still standing at the map. His general is out there somewhere, writing letters, holding what he can hold, asking with the same precise language for the same things he has been asking for 4 years. A man who asks that many times and never demands, never threatens, never uses the leverage that anyone with his position and his army would have. What is he waiting for? Justinian stares at the map. He does not know. That is the part he cannot get past. Not knowing. A man whose loyalty he has tested 20 ways, a man who has had the throne within reach on 3 separate occasions and handed it back every time, and still, in this room, alone, in the dark, he cannot get past the not knowing. He blows out the last candle and goes to bed. The letters are still on the table, unanswered. After Italy, the assignments stop. Not completely. He still holds his titles, still appears at court when required, still carries the rank of senior commander in the Eastern Empire. But the campaigns stop. The armies stop. The missions that would actually require his particular set of skills, those go to other men or nowhere. He waits. He is in his 50s. He has fought in Mesopotamia, North Africa, Italy twice, the Balkans, Persia. He has never held a court post and does not want one. This is a man built for the field, and the field has been taken away from him, and he waits in the capital of the empire he spent 30 years enlarging, with nothing to do. In the spring of 559 AD, something breaks through the silence. The Kutrigor Huns, a nomadic federation from the steppe north of the Black Sea, cross the frozen Danube with a raiding force and drive south in 3 columns, burning as they go. One column reaches the long walls, the outer defensive perimeter of Constantinople itself, 60 miles from the city gates. The city panics. Justinian's regular forces are scattered across every frontier of an empire stretched too thin for its ambitions. The garrison is inadequate. There is no army available to intercept cavalry moving fast through open country. Justinian sends for Belisarius. A messenger arrives at the house where the old general has been waiting. He gets up. He goes. No negotiation of terms. No reckoning aloud of what has been done to him and what he might reasonably be owed before he goes out again. The summons comes, and he answers it. The same way he has always answered it, because that is the only way he knows how to answer it. What he has available: roughly 300 veterans, retired soldiers who served under him in earlier campaigns, men past the age of regular service living in the city or its surroundings, palace guards, whatever volunteers he can pull together in the time he has. 300 men. He takes them west on the road toward the Kutrigur column. What follows, at a place called Melantias, is not a battle. He does not have the numbers for a battle. What he has is 3 decades of knowing how a raiding force moves, fast, confident, looking for weak resistance and finding none. A raiding force moving through foreign territory is, at its core, an act of theater. It performs strength. And theater can be answered with theater. He uses the terrain. He uses noise. He positions his small force to suggest a much larger one. His cavalry rides visible along the ridgelines and then disappears into the tree line, loops around, and rides visible again. The same 24 horses reading as a continuous column to anyone watching from a distance. He lights campfires at night across a wide area, the way an army of thousands would, not the tight cluster of 300 men. He has his soldiers make the sounds of a camp that does not exist, the movement of supply wagons, the assembly calls, the low, constant noise of an army at rest. He has been doing this kind of work for 30 years. He knows what an army looks like from the outside, and he knows that an exhausted raiding force moving fast through foreign territory does not stop to verify what it sees. It sees strength, it calculates the cost, and it makes a decision. The Kutrigur scouts ride up to the ridge, observe the campfires spread across the dark, hear the sounds, count what they think they count. They ride back. Their column pauses. The commanders confer. The math of a raid depends on finding weak positions, not engaging strong ones. This does not look weak. They pull back north. Constantinople is safe. Belisarius returns to the city. Justinian holds a ceremony, public acknowledgement, appropriate words about the general's service, gratitude expressed in front of the court. And then Belisarius is set aside again. No new command, no appointment, no indication that what he just did, saved the capital with 300 men and a lifetime of tactical knowledge, will translate into anything more than the ceremony it just received. He came when called. He did what was asked. He did it with 300 men. He goes back to waiting. In 562 AD, Belisarius is accused of participating in a conspiracy against the emperor. The exact nature of the conspiracy, who was involved, what was planned, whether the plot was real or manufactured or somewhere between the two, is not recoverable from the sources. An accusation came. A proceeding followed. Belisarius was found to have some connection to whatever was alleged. He was arrested. His property was confiscated. The wealth of 30 years of imperial service, the estates, the liquid assets, all of it taken by the state. He was placed under supervision, not prison exactly, but watched. The sources do not record what he said during any of this. They do not note whether he argued or protested or went quietly. He simply disappears from the record as a free man and reappears as something less. Later, a story would grow up around these years. In it, the emperor orders his eyes put out. Belisarius, blind, stripped of everything, sits in the street outside the palace where he served for 30 years and holds out his hand for coins. Belisarius, the beggar. the great general reduced to asking strangers for bread. It is a powerful image. It is also almost certainly fiction, a story that entered circulation well after his death, attached to his name because lives like his demand an ending that matches their weight. The blinding and begging appear nowhere in contemporary sources. Modern scholarship has traced the story to later tradition, finding it most convenient rather than most true. The truth was quieter. In 563 AD, 1 year after the accusation, Justinian pardoned him. Some of his property was returned. He was restored to something resembling his former status, though not to any command. There was no acknowledgement that the accusation had been wrong. No apology, no reckoning, just a pardon. The kind that powerful men extend when the moment has passed and there is no longer any reason to keep pressing. Belisarius accepted the pardon. He lived 2 more years. He died in 565 AD in Constantinople, the city he had saved twice. There is no record of his final days, no deathbed scene, no last words that anyone thought worth preserving. He ceased to appear in the historical record, and the silence that had been gathering around him for years became permanent. 8 months later, Justinian died. The emperor who had spent 30 years managing him, recalling him, underfunding him, watching him, reducing him, and finally arresting him, died 8 months after the man he had feared. The conspiracy Justinian had suspected for 3 decades never materialized. The sword was never turned against the throne. The crown was given back at Ravenna and was never reached for again. The territories Belisarius had spent his life winning, North Africa, Italy, began passing out of Roman hands within a generation. The work did not hold. He had kept his oath. The oath had not kept him. Go back to Ravenna, the spring of 540, the fog on the marshes, a single rider, counting towers. You have watched everything that came after, the Hippodrome, North Africa, the Triumph and the Kneel and the order to come home, Italy twice. The letters stacked unanswered on a table in Constantinople, 300 veterans on a road, an accusation, a pardon, 2 years of silence, a death. Now stand at the gate again. He is holding the West in his hands. The garrison has stood down. The nobles are waiting for him to say what he said yes to. The army behind him will go wherever he points it. He gives it back. Not the crown itself. There was no formal ceremony. No crown changed hands. He gives back the city, and the king, and the kingdom. He sends the dispatch east, with no mention of the offer, no mention of what was on the table, just the result. But there is one more thing, the thing that is not in the letter. The letter says, Ravenna has fallen. The treasury is intact. The king is in chains. It does not say, I gave you back an empire today. It does not say, I hope you see what I just handed over and what it cost me, and that you stop watching me the way you have been watching me since the day you almost ran. He never put that in any letter. He could not have. Not because it would have been dangerous, but because a man does not send a dispatch asking to be trusted. You can only show it, again and again, and wait. He showed it, again and again, at Ravenna and at the Triumph and in Italy, and in the letters that received no reply, and at Melantia's with 300 old men and a set of feints on a ridge. Every time the call came, he went. Every time the crown was in reach, he sent it east. Every time he could have demanded something back for what he gave, he didn't. He was waiting for one thing, not a reward, not a title. The thing that cannot be requested and cannot be earned and cannot be sent in a dispatch. He never got it. History remembers Justinian as the Great. It remembers Belisarius as loyal. You decide which of those two words is the tragedy.